This hearing will come to order. Good morning and welcome to our distinguished panel of witnesses. Thank you for appearing today to discuss the Department of Homeland Security's reliance on aging information technology systems as it works to secure the nation and why it is crucial that the department and its component agencies modernize their mission-critical systems. I also want to thank Ranking Member Romney and his staff for working with us on this hearing and for our continued partnership to address emerging threats and reduce wasteful government spending. Today's hearing continues our subcommittee's work to replace aging government technology that wastes taxpayer dollars, undermines our security, and limits government's efficiency and responsiveness. As our subcommittee continues to encourage agencies to adopt modern systems that are more efficient, more cost-effective, and frequently more capable, we will hear today from senior DHS officials about how their outdated technology negatively impacts the department's budget and our nation's safety. For example, if an aging system that DHS uses to vet passengers or visitors traveling into or through the United States goes offline, there's a chance that a dangerous person could enter our country. In such cases, workarounds can help limit national security risks, but they can also cause commercial delays or miss real-time intelligence. The Government Accountability Office and the DHS Inspector General have assessed DHS's IT modernization efforts, and in doing so have raised concerns about its reliance on outdated IT systems that perform mission-critical operations. They have looked at DHS IT systems that ensure the security of air travel, support disaster mitigation and preparedness activities, and enhance border security. And they have asserted that the failure of any of these systems would have a significant impact on public safety and national security. That's why it is crucial that DHS modernize these systems. Today's hearing is an opportunity to examine how legacy information technology is a threat to national security and how DHS can responsibly update its systems. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses about the risks posed by legacy IT systems at DHS and how DHS can successfully modernize these systems to keep the American people safe, secure, and free. And I'll now recognize Ranking Member Romney for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to hear from the witnesses today. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask for my comments to be included in the record. I would just note that, that the vulnerability of our systems has obviously changed in dramatic ways with the advent of AI. And there are probably two sides of that issue, which is one, we're more vulnerable, but two, the capacity to update systems through the use of AI to do some software development is probably enhanced. And so how this will change our perspective, I think, is one of the topics we should discuss today. But I think we all recognize that intrusion into government systems is a risk. It's has been carried out a number of times by the Chinese or by their cohorts and by Russians, and we need to take special care to protect the information provided by the American people. With that, I'll turn to the questions that we have and the testimony of our witnesses.
Thank you very much, Senator Romney. It is the practice of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee to swear in witnesses. So if you will all please stand and raise your right hands. Do you swear that the testimony you give before this subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated. Our first witness today is Eric Hassan. Mr. Hassan serves as the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. He is responsible for strategically aligning the department's technology resources to support DHS's missions and activities. He was a founding member of the U.S. Digital Service at the Office of Management and Budget and worked as a software engineer for Google before joining the federal government. Welcome, Mr. Hassan. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Chairwoman Hassan, Ranking Member Romney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The Department of Homeland Security interacts with the American people on a daily basis more than any other federal agency. From travelers moving through our air, land, and sea ports to businesses importing goods into our country, to disaster survivors applying for assistance in their hour of need. An increasing portion of these interactions occur through our information technology systems. Modernizing our legacy IT systems is essential to improving the experience of those that rely on our department for critical services and of strengthening our ability to carry out our vital Homeland Security missions. Modernization further offers opportunities to strengthen our cybersecurity posture and reduce spending. I've worked to improve service delivery at all levels of government throughout my career. As you noted, Chairwoman, I worked in Silicon Valley as an engineer and product manager to launch tools in over 30 countries to help people vote and engage with their representatives. I worked in philanthropy and state government to improve social service delivery at the state and local level. I left the private sector to co-found the United States Digital Service, where I worked to improve key services across DHS, and I bring those perspectives to my current role as the department's Chief Information Officer. Historically, agencies across the federal government, including DHS, took a big bang approach to IT modernization. At its most basic level, we attempted to acquire and deploy IT systems in the same way that we acquire and deploy ships. Government staff spent years gathering requirements, awarding a large contract to a single system integrator to build to those exact requirements, extensively test against them, and then launch. In theory, everything would go well, the new system would replace the old one, and then go into ongoing maintenance for several years until it was time to start the entire process over and modernize again. In practice, however, this approach, known as waterfall software development, leads to modernization programs going over budget and behind schedule at alarming rates. Single big bang releases of new systems lead to massively increased risk. At DHS today, we reject this approach in favor of a more incremental, iterative, and measured strategy based on private sector best practices that enable us to successfully modernize key services and retire costly legacy systems. Our newly initiated modernization programs focus on defining a minimum viable product, initial functionality that can be launched within months, not years. From there, we follow an agile software development methodology that gathers requirements, builds, tests, and launches software in rapid iterative cycles. Modernized systems are deployed and implemented in parallel to the old legacy ones to buy down risk over time. For our existing modernization programs started under the old model, we are focused on transitioning as much of the work to the new approach as possible. A critical element of this approach is that government, not any one vendor, must serve as the integrator ultimately responsible for successful delivery of an IT system. We depend on our industry partnerships, but require strong technical expertise in federal service to oversee contracts and ensure results. I am focused on strengthening our IT workforce to enable this, both by bringing in talent from the private sector and creating new opportunities for our workforce to develop and gain new skills. Our written testimony provides examples of our transition of legacy modernization programs into this new approach, as well as of newer initiatives started under this model. This work is showing results in strengthening cybersecurity, reducing spending, and most importantly, improving customer experience. Just yesterday, we announced that the department had reached its target of eliminating 20 million of the 190 million hours of administrative burden that we place on the public each year through modernizing our IT systems and simplifying our services. We still have much work to do, but I am proud of the work done by my colleagues here today and the entire DHS IT community to deliver modernized, secure, effective, and usable systems to support our department's critical missions. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. Our next witness is Charles Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong serves as the Chief Information Officer for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA. His role is to ensure that the agency's technology can support its mission to prevent, prepare for, and recover from domestic disasters. He previously served in the Customs and Border Protection Office of Information and Technology and was Deputy Chief Information Officer of DHS. Welcome, Mr. Armstrong. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Hassan, Ranking Member Romney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of the agency's Information Technology Modernization Program. FEMA is utilizing an agile development and delivering small segments and providing an opportunity for customers to interact with systems in a rapid fashion. This approach allows our developers to receive real-time feedback from customers on their experience. FEMA requires continuous modernization to maintain mission readiness. The overarching goal is to modernize and streamline processes through the consolidation of systems and platforms. As the Stafford Act-related disasters increase, our system must be able to scale to support the magnitude of the disaster. Today, I will highlight 3 FEMA modernization programs: grants management, the National Flood Insurance Program, and individual assistance. First, let me begin with grants management, or GMM. Based on prioritizing customer experience, FEMA is consolidating 8 disparate legacy systems into the FEMA Grants Outcomes System, better known as FEMA Go. The new IT platform is targeted towards the entire grants community of users, including FEMA personnel, the grants recipient, the subrecipients across state, local governments, tribal, and territorial partners. GMM, through FEMA Go, has migrated 5 programs to the new system in fiscal years 2018 through 2022, and has onboarded 14 additional grant programs in fiscal year 2023. FEMA plans to onboard approximately 20 additional grant programs by April of 2024 and decommission the old systems by 2025. Next, I'm going to discuss the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, or the PIVOT system. As a goal for making wise land use decisions, Congress established the NFIP to encourage communities to enact floodplain management ordinances consistent with federal standards. PIVOT facilitates and consolidates the NFIP core business processes from the legacy system and services program. PIVOT was an agile modernization program in the newer mold of technology modernization, replacing the old NFIP system and services program. PIVOT processes millions of transactions of flood insurance applications, policies, claims, and provides business workflow to automate manual processes and provides reporting and data analytics for financial and business requirements. PIVOT met its full operational capability in October of 2020, which is ahead of schedule and under budget. Finally, the Individual Assistance Technology Support Services Program. FEMA is planning to migrate 9 disparate systems into the Individual Recovery Information System, or IRIS, and will be re-platforming into the Recovery Cloud environment. The IRIS full operational capability is projected for July of 2027, contingent on out-year funding. FEMA's individual assistance also implemented login.gov as a multi-factor authentication and to support the state, local, tribal access in 2023, and plans to place this integrated component in the beginning of the registration intake process when streamlined disaster assistance intake is rolled out in August. In closing, again, FEMA thanks the committee for the opportunity to be a witness at today's hearing. The agency looks forward to continued partnership and is open to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Our third witness is Yemi Oshanaye. Mr. Oshinaye is the Chief Information Officer for the Transportation Security Administration. He works to ensure that TSA's technology capabilities meet the agency's task of keeping highways, railroads, mass transit, and air travel safe. He previously served as the Deputy Chief Information Officer at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Welcome, Mr. Oshinaye. You are recognized for your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairwoman Hassan, Ranking Member Romney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and discuss the modernization of DHS's critical legacy IT systems. I have the honor of serving as the CIO for TSA. In this role, I'm responsible for technology management, including technology delivery and support, innovation, cybersecurity, and all facets of IT resourcing that TSA uses to enable its mission. Prior to TSA, I served as a deputy CIO for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, where I led innovative practices and solutions to address the challenges of legacy systems and the processes used to modernize them. These practices are still in use today to enable modern systems and continue innovation for the nation's immigration benefit systems and across federal government. Prior to my federal service, I worked as a chief technology officer in private sector and as an entrepreneur providing software development and systems engineering services. At TSA, we are responsible for the security of over 430 federalized airports and routinely screen more than 2 million passengers, 5 million carry-on bags, 1.4 million pieces of checked luggage daily for explosives and other prohibitive items. TSA IT systems enable TSA to provide world-class security for the American traveling public while ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of TSA data and resources. I am proud of how TSA is approaching modernization to ensure our infrastructure, systems, and IT solutions remain resilient and effective. Our strategy for modernization at TSA is aligned with the DHS overall approach. Our focus is on leveraging human-centered design, a problem-solving technique we use to engage our customers. This technique allows us to leverage user experience and incorporate this feedback into our overall modernization strategy. When we operate this way, we provide a better opportunity for the user community to influence the final product, which improves the final product. TSA's IT modernization strategy enables the agency to use outsourced critical portions of the modernization to industry partners, such as cloud vendors, who invest heavily in modern services and infrastructure. Leveraging this investment empowers TSA to focus more of our talent and resources on process improvement and strategies for continued mission success. Two great examples of this are the Performance and Results Information System, otherwise known as PARIS. This system manages compliance and inspection activities. We recently successfully migrated to the cloud platform, which enables us to grow, scale, and provide robust analytics for TSA compliance activities. Another example is the Mission Scheduling Notification System, otherwise known as MSNS. This system schedules federal air marshals to protect in-flight travel. MSNS is a collection of systems with integration to many other systems, but currently includes a lot of extensive manual processing. We prototyped a modern process using cloud platforms with an intuitive design in a matter of months using Agile that alleviates manual processing. Our solution delivers rapidly over time by taking an iterative approach. These two examples show how TSA IT delivers effective technology to the mission and the strategy to sustain its capability. Chairwoman Hassan, Ranking Member Romney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today and for your continued support of TSA. I look forward to this discussion and your questions.
Thank you very much. Our final witness is Kevin Walsh. Mr. Walsh is the director of the Government Accountability Office's Information Technology and Cybersecurity Reviews. He has led GAO's work to identify challenges associated with federal government's use of aging technology, coordination of IT acquisitions, and IT-related risk assessments. His work has specifically focused on making recommendations to improve DHS's IT systems. Welcome, Mr. Walsh. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Chair Hassan, Ranking Member Romney, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting GEO to testify on this important issue. As you've heard, DHS plays a pivotal role in safeguarding the United States and its citizens from a variety of threats, and its IT systems are critical to that mission. Among other things, DHS prevents and responds to acts of terror. Its IT systems help to coordinate intelligence gathering and analysis, secure transportation systems, and collaborate with federal, state, and local law enforcement. DHS also secures our borders. Its technology helps to intercept illegal activities, combats human trafficking, and identifies unauthorized individuals, illicit drugs, and contraband. DHS also protects our infrastructure. Its IT defends against cyber threats to our essential services, sensitive information, and national security. DHS also responds to natural disasters. Its tech coordinates our emergency response, supports affected communities, and aids in their eventual recovery. In 2023, the department expects to spend about $10 billion on IT. Operating and maintaining existing systems is about $9 billion of that. In many cases, those existing systems are not the newest. However, just because they're old doesn't mean they're at risk or in need of retirement. The systems to focus on are those that we would flag as legacy IT. Systems that are outdated or obsolete, that may have heightened security risks or aren't meeting mission needs. Worryingly, the department's efforts to modernize such systems have a history of costing more than planned and taking longer than promised. We've reported that the department is on its third attempt at modernizing its financial systems, which recently breached schedule and performance goals. Its biometric identity management services, handling fingerprinting and facial recognition, are outdated, and the replacement project is years behind schedule. The system it uses to award billions in grants to prepare and respond to disasters is also outdated, and the replacement project is also years behind. While all is not quite right in the land of Oz, DHS has been taking promising steps to address these issues. For example, they've halted or suspended projects that are going poorly. They've addressed our recommendations at a better than average rate, documented lessons learned, and used modern development technologies like Agile and incremental. They've also been working diligently to address our associated high-risk area on IT and financial management functions. Going forward, DHS needs to continue addressing its legacy systems by cataloging those systems, identifying what's not performing, and prioritizing the work ahead. They should also make sure to turn off the old systems. It's worth noting that this should not be a one-time effort. It should be part of every agency's portfolio management to consider what IT isn't doing well. Ideally, we should also be forecasting when this will occur so that the government's responses are proactive instead of reactive. The Chair's Legacy IT Reduction Act includes provisions along those lines. Finally, this probably is not what you want to hear given the current fiscal environment. However, modernization may not be a cost-saving endeavor. What we do get are newer systems that are more efficient, better functionality, and stronger security. This concludes my statement, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We'll now proceed with our first round of questions, and I will start with a few and then turn it over to the ranking member. The first question is to you, Mr. Walsh. This subcommittee has led efforts to save taxpayer dollars by encouraging agencies to modernize their outdated and obsolete IT systems. These aging systems not only increase government costs, they can also jeopardize our national security. What specific risks has GAO identified that are presented by DHS's aging IT infrastructure? And can you provide an example, please?
The general risks to running legacy systems are risks to your security, mission needs, staffing, and cost. In a specific example, as has already been mentioned, FEMA is working on its grants management modernization program. That program is to replace a series of legacy systems that currently are experiencing the problems we're describing about today. They have manual processes that are a burden for recipients, a burden for the agency, and are slowing down the response to disasters. If that legacy system were to fully go off the rails, a disaster without grants from the government would be very difficult for our citizens.
Thank you. This is a question to Mr. Hassan and to Mr. Walsh. It's deeply concerning that DHS relies on outdated technology for some of its most important work. I heard the testimony about progress you're making, but there is still really important work where we're using outdated technology. Mission critical systems should be an IT modernization priority, but different agencies have different ideas about what makes an IT system mission critical. So, Mr. Hassan, how does DHS currently prioritize which systems to modernize?
Well, Chairwoman, thank you. As we look at establishing modernization priorities, we are looking to those that fit into three categories: those with that present significant cybersecurity risk, those that present opportunities to improve the experience the public has interacting with DHS services, and those that present opportunities to improve how our employees do their job every day and enable them to do that more effectively. On the cyber front, one tool that we have developed to aid us in this is a unified cybersecurity maturity model that evaluates all of our IT systems across the department on a number of different cyber axes and enables us to best identify areas of risk to prioritize our modernization efforts.
Thank you. So, Mr. Walsh, what is GAO's criteria for determining if something is mission critical?
So we have a two-tier test. The first looks at whether the functions of a given system are unique to the agency. If it's unique, then any sort of damage or disruption, what kind of impact it would have to the mission of that agency. Second tier, systems who, if they were damaged or the data were lost, misused, or disclosed, would also have a debilitating impact upon the agency.
Okay. So, Mr. Hassan, could DHS adopt GAO's mission-critical criteria to help decide what IT modernization projects to prioritize?
Absolutely, Chair, and I believe we look at very similar criteria across our planning efforts.
I think it's a really important area to focus on and really try to make sure that that is, in fact, how the agency is approaching it. Mr. Oshanaye and Mr. Armstrong, a question for the two of you. Let's discuss a couple of examples of systems that are critical to DHS's mission but rely on aging technology. Since 2009, TSA has used the secure flight system to spot potential threats to commercial airline travel within and outside of the U.S. This system connects to many other agency systems to identify individuals who are ineligible to fly. So, Mr. Oshanaye, can you walk us through what would happen if the secure flight system were to go offline, fail, or be even partially inaccessible?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Similar as Mr. Walsh spoke, the system has been in existence for a while, but calling it a legacy system wouldn't be the same as a mainframe. That system is constantly updated, and if that system would go offline, we do have an offline policy or process where we can operate for a certain amount of time. We also test that scenario for COOP to make sure that if we did have an outage, we'd still be able to operate and protect travelers.
But what would happen? I mean, I understand there's a workaround, and I made that comment in my opening, but a workaround has its cost too. What if it were to go offline or fail or be even partially inaccessible? And let's say your workaround didn't work, right? What happens?
In a catastrophic event, or if you would exceed the COOP timeframe, it would hinder our ability to see travelers who are a danger to other travelers.
Okay, thank you. Another example of DHS's aging IT infrastructure is FEMA system that enables the flows of funds and services to disaster survivors, and Mr. Walsh was just getting at that. Mr. Armstrong, if this system went down, how would Americans in need because of a natural disaster access FEMA services?
Chairman Hassan, can I ask to clarify that? Because Mr. Walsh talked about grants management.
Fair,
and
different.
I want to make sure that you're not referring to individual assistance so that I answer your correct
Well,
question.
so let's talk about individual assistance. What would happen in a natural disaster? Access to the individual assistance system goes down.
So Individual assistance, as you can imagine, is critical to the mission of FEMA. It's one of the systems that we rely on to give immediate recovery to that survivor during the recovery and response period of a disaster. So without that capability in place, we would have to resort to manual processes, which could either slow things down or prevent us from adequately addressing the needs of the individual during that critical time.
It could have a really significant and at times really dangerous impact, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I'll now turn to Senator Romney for his questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the chance to listen to each of you and to hear your perspectives and update on our systems. I'm curious as we begin, Mr. Hassan, do Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Oceanaya both report to you? What is the organizational structure within DHS for the different, the various agencies that are part of the entire entity?
Thank you, Ranking Member. Under the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act, or FTARA, the component CIOs under DHS report into me. However, they also maintain a reporting structure into their component agencies.
So it's a matrix reporting system. Do they follow the same approach that you described? And I'm curious as to how widespread your approach is, which is you described, I'll call it the Big Bang approach, which is a big contract going out and waiting for a full system being delivered by an outside contractor, versus something now which is, I don't know how you describe it, incremental, which is you begin with a system and then add on to it as time goes on and improve it as time goes on. How much of what is being done follows the latter approach as opposed to the former Big Bang approach?
At this point, Ranking Member, agile delivery and this newer approach to modernization is widespread across DHS. This has been a journey over really the last decade. Some of our component agencies were earlier adopters of this approach. Some have made that transition more recently, but it is now the norm.
Do you know whether that's the case also more broadly through our government, or I mean, I presume you interact with CIOs and other departments as well. Is the agile approach being adopted more on a widespread basis?
I believe so. That's been a transition that has been discussed across the Federal CIO Council and among my colleagues over the last many years.
We have a history of spending a lot more than the private sector to get an updated modernization of our systems. Is that because of the prior approach, or is it just endemic to the way government works?
I believe it is in many ways tied to that approach. One of the results of that Big Bang approach with single system integrators was that every IT system would build everything from the ground up. They would have their own infrastructure, their own support teams, their own login systems, for example. And as we've moved to modernize, we're looking to break that down, offer up common enterprise services for common pieces of functionality. That was the norm, for example, when I worked in Silicon Valley, and enable each individual system to only focus on their unique functionality needs.
I can't resist asking you a personal question, which is, you were in Silicon Valley. I read stories about the billionaires that are, that pop like popcorn in Silicon Valley. What led you to leave Silicon Valley and go to work in the government? Are you happy you made that decision? And are you looking for a ticket back, or is this
No.
Is this a responsibility that you particularly feel is important and that you enjoy?
No, sir, I'm not looking for a ticket back. I have been thrilled to make this transition. I come from a family of public servants. My father is a retired public servant at the General Services Administration, and was when the healthcare.gov disaster occurred in 2014, was looking at the work I was doing in Silicon Valley and saw the opportunity to use my skills for a bigger purpose. So I was thrilled to be able to co-found the U.S. Digital Service, and have since helped recruit dozens of other technologists from the private sector into government, and look to bring on many more in the years to come.
Very much appreciate that as a citizen. You described the priorities that the chairman asked about which systems you modernize. And it struck me that one of those was perhaps the highest, which is protecting national security, protecting personal information that individuals might have, that there's a high degree of sensitivity there. Are we fully modernized in that category, or are we still operating some legacy systems that present a real risk either to national security or to the personal privacy of our citizens?
Senator, we certainly have more work to do. Several of the systems that my colleagues here have mentioned do present cybersecurity risks through the ongoing operation of our legacy systems, and we are focused on modernizing those as rapidly as possible.
And let me turn now to something I mentioned in my opening statement, which is AI and the impact of AI on your respective responsibilities. I'm aware of the writing today and the discussion about how vulnerable we are to machine learning to be able to break into our systems. What is your sense of that? What are we going to need to do to protect the most critical information that we have from attack from malign interests that would seek to undermine our national security or our personal privacy?
Ranking Member, thank you. As you noted, AI presents significant opportunities in modernizing our systems as well as better harnessing AI to advance our mission delivery, but the risk of adversarial use of AI is real, as is the risk of disparate bias or unintended disparate impact from our use of AI. So Secretary Mayorkas recently launched a department-wide AI task force that I am co-chairing along with our Undersecretary for Science and Technology that is looking at exactly those questions. We are still early in our work, but are taking this work very seriously and have it as a major focus for the year to come.
Maybe it's a conjecture at this point, but any sense of what we might need to do to protect critical information from an AI attack? I mean, do we need to almost go offline in some respects with some databases? Or I mean, I just wonder how you can protect our systems given the power of an AI approach.
Well, Senator, one area I'd start with is a little more basic than that, is even AI literacy among our employees and those with access to our data. We expect to see an increasing number of AI-generated phishing emails that are attempting to trick our employees and other users into giving up information, and we need to be able to ensure that our employees know what AI is capable of and are on the lookout as they are executing their responsibilities first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Romney. I'll recognize Senator Langford for his questions.
Thanks for doing this hearing, and gentlemen, thanks for your testimony as we walk through this. I'm going to continue the conversation with you. USCIS still uses paper for a lot of the immigration processing. So tell me the status of where we're moving right now. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are changing along the border and trying to be able to do data systems there. USCIS seems to be lagging in some of that. Where are we?
There we go. Senator, thank you. I actually believe USCIS is now a success story in their digitization journey. The first project that I was assigned to work on when I joined the U.S. Digital Service was USCIS's transformation program that was seeking to digitize their nearly 7 million immigration benefits applications every year. When we started that effort, they were characteristic of the old Big Bang approach, a single vendor with proprietary technology that had been working for years and only modernized or digitized a handful of forms, and processing of those digital forms ended up being slower than paper. We worked with USCIS to restructure the program, implement agile development, move to the cloud, and implement human-centered design practices to ensure that today a significant majority of USCIS's benefits applications are processed digitally, and they are using those capabilities to reduce their backlogs and improve their efficiency.
So USCIS and ICE and CBP, their systems don't necessarily all talk to each other in moments that they need to be able to talk to each other. Do you know of an area between the three of them as they're trying to be able to be more interoperable in their systems and their data links, where you don't have to actually contact somebody else to be able to get that information? They can actually pull it as they need to.
Yes. Senator, historically that has been correct, and that's been something that we've worked very hard to address over the last several years. Through our Southwest Border Technology Integration Program, we've been working to digitize the processes for non-citizens encountered at the border to include issuing notices to appear digitally, as well as handing off information between agencies. One example there is ICE's new case acceptance system, which allows CBP to refer a case to ICE for custody digitally rather than waiting hours for ICE to come pick up a paper file and make a custody determination. This has saved millions of hours in transfer time, moving people through our process more efficiently.
Yeah, it has been helpful. What's been interesting is there's still a couple of moments there where they're still having to contact each other, and we can talk offline about some of those. I'm sure your team is already making contact with you about it. I was in Arizona actually last week, and as I'm regularly down there from my responsibilities from this committee actually, and in that dialogue, it was interesting to be able to hear several folks say this system, the technology piece of it, is so much better than what it used to be. And I could see that and see the processing and the speed of that, where you've actually got people trying to input the data and to be able to get them out. The challenge now is that we have more and more people that are data input folks at the border, and that's always the challenge, is the human piece now. And I'll have a different set of questions for DHS on who should be the person actually entering all that data. Right now, it's a person with a badge and a gun is also the person that's all, sitting there entering all the data. That's maybe not best use of their time to be able to do that, but that has been a real help. But finding other ways that we can connect. It was interesting as well, just on a vulnerability issue, how many areas of the border still we don't have cell coverage and are very, very remote. And you've got folks that are out there with a portable device trying to be able to connect in, and obviously there is no connection. That's a larger issue to be solved. Or that when you're along the border and you get to a border patrol station, immediately you open your phone and it says, "Welcome to Mexico." When I'm 50 feet from Mexico and you suddenly realize all the information that I'm processing is processing through a cell tower on the Mexican side, not on the American side. There's some clear vulnerabilities that are there. How are we handling some of those vulnerabilities with our data?
Well, Senator, thank you. I've had that exact same experience during my trips down to the border. We are working to expand connectivity and infrastructure along the border. It is challenging given the geography. Some of the areas we're looking at include CBP's use of mesh networking kits that can extend the coverage of their devices, as well as satellite connectivity, and in other cases, looking at partnerships with other federal agencies as well as state agencies that have land rights along the border, including in parks, that we need to look at to put up more cell towers and expand coverage. So we still have work to do there, but it's something we're looking at very closely.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks for the progress on that, but we still obviously have a little bit of progress to go on it, but it is nice to be able to see the work that's going. I also appreciate the off-the-shelf focus to say if there is some technology that already exists to do this, then let's invest our dollars in other areas and other technologies, I think is where you're trying to be able to get at as well, to say that we don't have to create this ourselves. When I'm along the border, and last week when I was there along the border, many of the agents that were there, both at the ports of entry and between the ports of entry, their first comment was, a lot of the folks that are coming are non-Spanish speakers. They had 1,000 people from Mauritania that came in the last 2 weeks that are adult males from Mauritania that are coming in large numbers, Russians that are coming in large numbers, Pakistanis, Middle Eastern men that are coming in that we have no criminal records for at all and have no background information, but we also have no translator that's there. And I said, okay, how's that going? And they all said, everyone shows up with their phone and with Google Translate on, and we stand there and Google Translate communicate back and forth to each other. I'm sure there's been a push with DHS saying we need to develop our own system to be able to do this. But currently the Google Translate is working and everyone seems to be fine with it and allows us to be able to use monies in other areas that are really must need, develop new software technologies. So in places that we can do that, we've got a lot of catching up to do. I continue to encourage you and your team to use off-the-shelf tested software and technologies where we can to be able to make sure that we're investing dollars, trying to get us completely caught up with, we're not paper-based in other areas. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Y'all, thank you. Thanks for all the work.
Thank you.
Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chair Hassan and Ranking Member Romney. Really important hearing. Thank you all for being here today. And Mr. Hassan is a former tech person myself who now serves in government. I appreciate your work and your willingness to serve. But I want to move right into workforce challenges because we know that they are, well, every area in our country has workforce challenges, but really particularly in legacy IT. So maintaining legacy IT systems, well, it requires a specialized workforce capable, of course, of supporting technology no longer utilized, or I wouldn't say no longer utilized, but because it is utilized, it's there, but not as nimble as we can be with newer technologies. So in many cases, you can't find the skilled workers trained in dated systems, and I hate to use the word dated systems and technologies, but those kinds of things that I programmed in, COBOL, Fortran, assembler from the 1980s and 90s, you're trying to find a workforce that can maintain while you still have it, that can develop new systems, and then unload and reload, make that transition. So it's really important. And so while we transition, we have to train our IT, the younger generation coming up, on how to do those things. So Mr. Hassan, for maintenance development, for transition, design and planning, and for unloading a database and reloading it to the new system, if you will, or databases, however they are. How are you approaching this expected modernization, and what are you doing to prepare the workforce that is going to live in both of these worlds and needs to for a little bit longer? And then after that, Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Oshania, if you want to talk about it as well.
Well, Senator, thank you. It certainly is always an experience when I bring a new engineer or IT professional in from Silicon Valley and introduce them to how things do work in the
wonders of
government.
COBOL.
Well, we're thankfully largely free of COBOL at DHS. I think there's probably a pocket or two
The
there.
lovely
here or there.
assembler, 16-bit, you know.
Yes, but it certainly is a different experience than working in the private sector. We're focused on training across the board. One of the areas that I and my fellow CIOs at DHS have identified as a priority is standing up a department-wide IT academy that will include standardized training for all new IT hires into the department, as well as ongoing development opportunities for our employees to develop new skills, whether that be in AI and data science, customer experience, agile development, or the like. The IT workforce at DHS is a tremendous asset. We have over 5,000 talented and committed professionals, and so while we're also looking to bring in more talent from the private sector, we have opportunities and are focused on enabling our existing workforce to grow and continue to increase their impact.
Well, and you may have to work with the private sector who's still using legacy systems in order to share data or do some of that, so it's important. So, Mr. Armstrong? You laughed at my 16-bit, so I appreciate that.
I happen to be one of those legacy COBOL programmers, so it might have put some
I
of
have a
my...
hexadecimal calculator on my desk still, so there you go.
It might have helped put my kids through college. So. At FEMA, and admittedly, I've only been there about 8 months now, so I'm still learning a lot about FEMA. We have a pretty aggressive program in place for retraining some of the existing staff on things like cloud technology and trying to get them, I would say, retooled for the newer technologies. But we're also in the process, unfortunately, because we've lost so many folks through attrition, of hiring a little over 100 people in IT. And so we're looking for newer skill sets as we're bringing people on board. The challenge is attracting them away from industry, and you don't come into government jobs for the money, obviously. So you have to really get them wanting to come in to do the mission and be part of something bigger than themselves. So that's kind of our approach.
Mr. Oceania.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. What we've done at TSA, in addition to what my colleagues mentioned, is kind of reducing the fear of getting your hands dirty. Myself and my deputy are also former developers, so we allow folks to come in and use the technology. We've noticed that very new and very tenured staff, if you give them a chance to work with vendors and come in and just spend the time, they'll kind of be open to it and use that process. We actually had a staff member build a system themselves in the last 30 days that we're actually using internally. So once you reduce that fear factor and let everyone learn and then fail forward, we're able to build out what I call the IT IQ. We even have in our airports what we call lift cells, innovation cells, which allow folks in the airports to come up with ideas and build on platforms. And the more you let folks work and use it, the smarter they become.
I like that ITIQ. I'm going to use that one, but thank you. I'm going to move back over to you, Mr. Armstrong, and talk about FEMA disaster grants, because last month I led several of my Nevada delegation colleagues in urging the administration to grant our governor's request to declare a major disaster in Nevada due to severe winter storms. Excuse me, that caused extreme flooding, rock slides, landslides. And so I was pleased to see a disaster later declared. So it allows our Nevada residents, our local businesses, our tribal communities the access to the federal resources that they need. But as Nevadans start to access these vital FEMA resources, I want to ensure that your systems are up to date and secure so that my constituents can get what they need to rebuild their lives in many cases. So, Mr. Armstrong, what is the status of the FEMA grants management modernization, which was started in 2017? And FEMA's individual assistance and technical support modernization, which is really that interface that began last year.
Sorry, the IT guy forgot to turn on. With respect to grants management modernization, we've moved over 19 grant types so far. We've got another 20 to move, and those are projected to be moved by April of 2024. In addition to that, the program is in the process of getting a new vendor on board to start to transition data from the legacy systems into the new systems, and that is projected to start in the fall of this year. So the goal would be to get all the grants up and running by the spring of next year, the data migrated over by midsummer of next year, and decommissioning to happen sometime in 2025 of the legacy system. And then with respect to your second question about individual assistance, that planning is still early on. There's some initial work that's been done to stand up a cloud environment instance as part of our bigger FEMA cloud environment. So that work should be completed in the fall. And currently the program is in the planning / looking for funding stage to really get off the ground.
That's our trigger, looking for funding. But I would urge putting an app as well, because most people, if they're in a disaster, what do they leave with? Just a phone. They don't maybe have their other things with them, and that's an easy way for them.
Yeah, and I don't want you to get the impression that nothing's going on. There is still some work to try to help modernize some of the legacy processes that are there today. We recently, led by the administrator, had a dog fooding session where we brought in our executives and put them through scenarios where they got to kick the tires on both grants management and individual assistance. We all had scenarios where we were different types of survivors or different types of grant users, and had to interact with the system and give feedback to the program. So it's a good opportunity to step outside of your comfort zone and put yourself in the shoes of somebody that actually has to use the system.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I do have one more question, Madam Chair, if there's no one waiting, is that okay? Well, I want to talk, I know that Senator Romney talked about the vast amounts of data that we have and how do we keep it secure and some of the things that are really important to us. So I want to talk about the concept of federal data centers, because in 2014, OMB launched an initiative to consolidate our federal data centers, which has resulted in a cost savings of $5.8 billion. And the Department of Homeland Security began its own data center consolidation efforts long before government-wide federal data consolidation efforts were launched. And so DHS, you undertook this project with the objective of fostering productive collaboration and facilitating improved data sharing. And so in March, this committee, we're very proud to have marked up the Data Center, Federal Data Center Enhancement Act, bipartisan legislation I introduced that requires OMB to coordinate a government-wide effort to develop minimum requirements for federal data centers related to cyber intrusions, data center availability, and resilience against both physical attacks and natural disasters. So, Mr. Walsh, how do you assess the success of Department of Homeland Security data center consolidation efforts?
So, as you noted, data center consolidation has been a great source of cost savings in the government. And DHS, with the emphasis they've placed on enterprise-wide services, has been working towards that. A prior colleague of mine once said that if you can't consolidate, if you can't do it well, up to snuff to the metrics that you're talking about, then maybe it's time for us to get out of the business. And I think the government, in many cases over the past 7-8 years, has been doing exactly that, getting out of the business. And I think DHS has been doing a good job, as you noted, towards the forefront of the government to eliminating its data centers.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Senator Rosen. I have a few more questions, and then we will likely wrap up unless other senators come on in. Mr. Walsh, I guess before I start with a question to you, I just want to note for Mr. Hassan and all of the DHS folks here, Senator Lankford talked about the lack of cell service, for instance, on the southern border and the challenges that creates. It's also creating a huge challenge, as you know, on the northern border. So I just want to raise that and make sure that we're focused on just trying to make sure that wherever our personnel are, they have the connectivity that they need to keep us safe. And I hope you will take that emphasis back with you. Now to Mr. Walsh. Federal IT modernization projects take many years and considerable resources to plan and execute. We've been talking about that. They often face significant barriers, too. For example, since 2015, DHS has been working to update its aging system that, in order to assist federal law enforcement in identifying threats, integrates biometric data from across government. And I believe you commented on that in your testimony. However, this project has run into several challenges, causing Congress to request an independent evaluation of the project. So, Mr. Walsh, you mentioned the GAO has done some monitoring of DHS's progress on this particular project. What challenges have you identified that are preventing DHS from completing this project?
So, first, we are currently doing work on the HEART program on your behalf. So we're happy to chat with you at any point on the status of that work. Our prior issued work identified a series of issues related to the HEART program, and we made a total of 7 recommendations. 3 of those recommendations remain open. They are related to reviewing contract deliverables from contractors before accepting them, tracking and monitoring costs, defining and monitoring stakeholder involvement. So those are the 3 remaining recommendations, making sure that you involve your stakeholders, track your costs, and don't carte blanche accept what the contractor gives you and tells you. However, as we've been talking, HEART is one of these big bang approaches. Yep. It is not one of these new, smaller, fail fast, get a product out the door quick. So that is a problem. And I think DHS has identified their 2020 breach of this program due to overly complex and potentially high-risk design, as well as disagreements with the contractors.
Thank you. This is a question for the 3 DHS representatives here. In 2020 and 2022, I wrote to DHS requesting a department-wide IT modernization plan. The department still hasn't provided one. IT modernization plans play an important role in an agency's ability to make progress on their IT goals, control costs, and provide transparency. So as much as I appreciate the progress you all have reported in today about, I am still concerned that without an agency-wide IT modernization plan, DHS will continue to struggle to prioritize updating its most critical systems. So, Mr. Hassan, without a department-wide IT modernization plan, how do you ensure that the agency is meeting its goals, especially in regard to mission-critical systems?
Chair, thank you. First, we are currently finalizing our updated IT strategic plan for the department. Our current plan expires at the end of this fiscal year, and we'll be releasing the new one prior to its expiration that will identify our overall modernization priorities. But ultimately, in government, the truest sign of your priorities is where you align your budget. And so I've been focused, along with our acting CFO, on strengthening the IT oversight of our budget request. Over the last 3 years, we have progressively increased IT involvement in the annual budgeting process under the spirit of FITARA, such that now, as we're preparing our 25 budget request, every IT investment proposal by any part of the department is evaluated against the IT modernization priorities that I have set out for the department, and then we are ensuring that my component CIOs and then ultimately I have full review and approval over the IT budget request. So ultimately, I believe that our budget request becomes the modernization plan, as that is where we intend to align our resources.
Okay, thank you. We will follow up with you on that. Now, Mr. Oshanaye and Mr. Armstrong, how would a department-wide modernization strategy help inform TSA's or FEMA's modernization efforts? Mr. Oshanaye?
Thank you, Chairwoman. As CIO Hassan mentioned, we actually follow in tandem with the department. Some of the components, we're also building out our strategic plan as well and working to align with the department. Some of the things that we've adopted in addition to technology advancement is technology and context, making sure that when we put new technology out, it actually aligns to the mission. And so part of saving money on the mission is making sure we put the right technology out so people can use it, and we're not iteratively trying to change technology because it doesn't adapt to what the user needs. So we use that, and we work with the department on all of our upgrades and our processes so that we're in alignment, not only with the department, but with other components. And then when we find an opportunity to share technology, we do that so we can consolidate what we're using.
So so what I'm hearing you say is a department-wide modernization plan will help you all align and be more efficient, more effective, get the technology you need. I'm just trying to understand what the benefits are.
Absolutely. We're in alignment. Will help us be more effective and optimal.
Okay. And Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Traditionally, the components have been a key part of helping develop the departmental strategic plan, so I would anticipate we would be all providing input into that plan, as we all have different mission needs, different technology baselines, and so that would get incorporated into the plan. Certainly FEMA would benefit from having an overarching plan. We have a strategy from 2022, which will probably need to be updated in the next year after the DHS plan is developed. But certainly it helps, one, communicate to the non-IT leadership across the department, where are we headed? And two, it's critical, as we pointed out, about identifying mission-critical systems. It also helps identifying mission-critical strategies about those systems, so that throughout that budget formulation process, we have a strategy to point back to say that this initiative is supported by this overarching strategy to help justify where we're headed from a funding standpoint.
Thank you. Mr. Hassan, another question. Having adequate financial resources is obviously a key component of any IT modernization project, and in turn, smart investments in modernizing legacy IT can save taxpayer dollars. It's important that agencies have flexibility for multi-year IT modernization projects to help them navigate unpredictable appropriation cycles and to keep projects running on time and on budget. An example of this flexibility is having an IT working capital fund. DHS maintains what it calls a non-recurring expenses fund. Can you describe the similarities and differences between that fund and a traditional IT working capital fund?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so since Congress passed the Modernizing Government Technology Act, DHS had been requesting budgetary authority to establish an IT working capital fund. In the fiscal 22 budget, we were granted the authority to create this non-recurring expenditures fund, or NEF, that takes expired funds and allows us to spend those both on IT modernization projects, but also on modernizing our facilities, which has been a critical priority for Secretary Mayorkas to improve the experience of our employees. And so we have stood that fund up. The funds in that project the funds there will be split 50-50 across IT and facilities. The initial investments there are on some facilities improvement projects, and we're preparing now to begin considering the first round of IT projects. So we believe it does meet the intent of an IT working capital fund, even though it is technically a little different.
But it's still taking some of those resources and using them for non-IT purposes.
My understanding from the budget discussions when it was being enacted were that when we expanded the scope of the fund to facilities, we also increased the total portion of expired funds that were being transferred. So ultimately, our CFO, our Chief Readiness Support Officer, and I viewed the proposal as a win-win for the department.
Okay, but you still don't have an IT working capital fund that is devoted over years just to improving the IT and modernizing IT?
Technically, no, but we believe that the NEF will grow considerably as funds expire year over year, and with the intended 50-50 split with IT funding there, that will be a long-term source of much-needed IT modernization funding for us.
All right, thank you. So now to Mr. Hassan and Mr. Oshanaye and Mr. Armstrong. You are all CIOs, Agency Chief Information Officers, play an important role in advocating for the IT needs of the agency. As we discussed today, you and your peers work to ensure that DHS has the technology it needs. That's obviously critical so that the agency can fulfill its mission to keep the American people safe. So, Mr. Hassan, are there additional authorities that would help you do your job more effectively?
Chair, I believe that FITARA gave us as CIOs sufficient authority to effectively oversee our IT at our departments. My focus is on strengthening our internal processes to best leverage those authorities to ensure that I'm able to carry out those responsibilities fully.
Okay, and Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Oshanaye, as the CIOs of agencies within DHS, what resources or guidance could Mr. Hassan's office provide to support your work and meet the unique needs of FEMA and TSA? We'll start with you, Mr. Armstrong.
I have to also agree with Mr. Hassan. Having been at the department for quite some time, I will tell you, FITARA has really made a significant difference in the authorities that the CIO has. And just to give you an example, I've come from a community where I had a lot of centralized IT under me to an environment where IT is more spread out across the agency and more federated. However, I have a lot of checks and balances in place and processes so that I get to influence decision-making across the agency with respect to the planning of IT, the budgeting of IT, the execution piece of IT. And a lot of that is through the chief acquisition executive doing regular reviews and providing oversight. But I am certainly at the table to help move that needle one way or another where it needs to go. So I feel we have the authorities at this point in time. It's a matter of maturing them and executing them.
Thank you, Mr. Oshanaye.
I will add, I'll say FITARA has helped support my job and my role in my agency. I will say that at the department level, CIO Hassan and staff working with other counterparts across DHS headquarters, gives a credibility to the component to be able to have the authority to sit at a table with counterparts like the CFO or the component acquisition executive when we want to make a change or make a mandate if we have to for the agency. They look to the department, and when they see the collaboration, they echo that at the component level. So that's been very helpful.
Well, thank you. Before we close, I've asked a series of questions to the three CIOs at DHS, but Mr. Walsh, anything that you want to add or weigh in on here?
Thank you. I would like to chime in on that last bit about CIO authorities.
Yeah.
We took a look in GAO 22-104-603 at the authorities that private sector CIOs had and compared those to our federal CIOs and found that for the most part, private sector CIOs and federal CIOs had similar authorities. However, we did make a pair of recommendations, one of which was to OMB to enhance the coordination not between CIOs, but between the other C-suite executives.
Yeah.
So making sure that the C-suite plays nice together. So I do think that is relevant here. The CIOs perhaps have the authority. Now getting the C-suite all on the same page is the next challenge.
I appreciate that very much because that's been my experience too, even when the authorities may be in place, making sure that everybody's actually recognizing that they exist and including your voices in the planning and budgeting process and prioritizing work in the agency is really important. I'll also just note that if there are authorities that you realize you need and don't have, or ambiguity about your authority creates barriers, we need to know about that because that's obviously something we can work with you to address. But if you all don't speak up and let us know, we can't help you with that. So I want to thank all of you, Mr. Hassan, Mr. Oceanaya, and Mr. Armstrong, for your testimony today, and to the three of you for the important work that you do for the Department of Homeland Security. First job of government is to keep people safe, and I am very grateful that you are working to do that along with your colleagues each and every day. And thank you, Mr. Walsh, to you and your colleagues at the Government Accountability Office for providing accountability and guidance to make DHS's work more successful. The hearing record will remain open for 15 days until 5 p.m. on June 15th for submissions of statements and questions for the record, and this hearing is now adjourned.